Okay, so today we're looking at scheduling and assigning tasks in today's webinar. Before we jump into the content, I do like to point out that up at the top right here, if you hover over the information icon, you're going to find access to other resources that can be quite beneficial. So the training sites, I believe that that's actually had a bit of a revamp. So it's some good search functionality here. It organizes the content really well, so I'd recommend checking that out. And then also you can access the webinars area. You can also submit an idea to our product team. So, check out some of the resources there. And one other thing that I wanted to point out is down at the very bottom right of your screen is a little question mark. And I believe that the official term for this is the FP Buddy. Yes, it is. And this will give you context-specific assistance based on the page that you're on in the system. A lot of people don't know that it's there because we really try to make it, not very intrusive. We didn't want to copy like that, the Microsoft paperclip, where something's kind of jumping up on you and asking you if you want, if you need help. So it's meant to be kind of out of the way, but it does really help with providing context-specific information. So depending on the page you're on in the system, it'll give you content that is relevant to the page that you're looking at. So if you ever have any questions and you just want to see if there's a really quick answer that maybe other people have been searching for, this will give you the most common answers to the questions that are related to the page that you're looking at. Okay, let's jump into the specifics of our webinar. Sophie, anything that you want to add before we jump in here?
No, I don't think so. The questions coming in are just some people having some audio issues, but I think that might be a GoToWebinar problem. I don't think there's anything we can really help with it at the moment.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry to hear that. Let's see here. I'm just curious what those are. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, hopefully that'll be able to get resolved. But let's jump into our content today. So the first thing that we're going to be looking at is we're going to look at the task details page, and more specifically, we're going to look at the add task page. I want to cover the fields and the content that are available for a task, just so that we have a baseline understanding of what is available within a task before we get into the actual assignment. So what I'm going to do to see that is I'm actually just going to hover over the tasks module, and I'm just going to select add task. And that's going to bring me to the task add page. And I'm just going to run through the fields that are available here pretty quickly, just to make sure that everyone has a good foundation of what tasks are and what content you can put into them. So a task is of course an assignment to an individual or potentially multiple individuals. And when you look at this page, you'll notice that we have only a couple required fields. It's really just the title of the task and who it's assigned by. And I'm actually surprised to not see assigned to here. I would have thought that was a required field, but apparently it's not. Other than that, everything else is mostly optional, but there's a few things that you'll see. One is type. Now, type is something that is important when it comes to shared tasks. Everything else really isn't that important unless you're using this field for something specific to your agency, but shared tasks will allow you to assign a task to multiple people. So that is usually where you'd want to select that. Otherwise, not really all that applicable. I wouldn't recommend spending too much energy thinking about that, but shared task is important if you do want to assign the task to multiple people. If I select this, the assign to field now becomes a multi-select field. So that's an important item to keep in mind. The milestone is a list maintenance item. So you're going to find this in the admin section under list maintenance, and you can customize this to your liking. I have it here set up in a way to kind of represent a client interaction approval process. So we're tagging tasks with milestones to represent where this is in the approval process or interaction with the client. So whether there's a revision request from the client, or there's a final review task that's coming up, or if the concepts that have been approved and it's moving to the next stage. So that's how my demo system is set up to use this, but you can use it really for anything that you'd like. It's just a label that you're placing on the task, and it will show up on the dashboard in blue writing when you hover over the task, and we'll see that a little bit later. Assign date will autofill, but you can change that if you want to. Assign by will default to yourself typically. You then have some content that usually is going to autofill depending on where you actually assign the task from. And we're going to see some of that when we start delegating some of these tasks. But this is whether we're relating the task to a job or a schedule and things like that. We then have some of the basic data that you would expect. When is it starting? When is the task due? Is it due at a certain time of day? Although function point really isn't really meant for hour-to-hour scheduling, you can specify what time of day you want something done by if you'd like, and that will show up on the dashboard as well. Who is the task assigned to, of course, the status of the task, percentage complete, which is user defined, the budgeted hours, and the priority. Priority is also a list maintenance item, and you can adjust that to your liking. It will show up in different areas, task finds, and things like that. We then have this box here, which is actually quite interesting. It's one of the only areas of the system that you'll see this data. And what this is really letting you know is for the task that you're looking at, how many hours have been delegated for the service that the task is tied to. This is a bit more of an advanced feature we might touch on a little bit later. We then have the ability to upload files, and it's really simple. You can just drag a file in here, drop it in, and it just uploads. You can upload multiple files in here, so you're not limited to just one. The per upload is set to 50 megabytes, so it's not really meant for like anything too high res or InDesign files or really large videos or anything like that. But anything 50 megs or less as an upload you can do. So that's the basics of the task details page and all the content that can live within tasks. Once a task is created, you also have things like comments as well. Pretty basic stuff regarding the task details page. So now let's take a look at the process of actually delegating tasks. And there's a few ways I want to show that you can assign tasks that a lot of people aren't aware of that can make things really, really easy. The first thing that I want to show is on the dashboard, there's a button here in the Tasks and To-Dos panel that says Quick Task. This is going to be very, very useful. If I select Quick Task, it's just going to give me a window here. I hesitate to call it a pop-up because it's not really a pop-up. It's in the same browser window. But it just quickly allows you to add a task with as little or as much detail as you want it to be. So it could be something like, brew some coffee. So I want myself to brew some coffee. And and everything else is really optional. If I hit submit, it'll show up on my dashboard as just brew some coffee with no due date. However, I can also specify a due date. We'll say I want this done by today, and I want it done by 2 p.m. And this is an urgent priority because we all need our coffee. And then I can then choose to add additional details. So even though it's a quick task from your dashboard, we can relate this to a job. So I'm going to relate it to our in-house job. We could relate it to a service. This relates to where, if we were to track time against this task, where would that time go? It's an errand in this case. When do we need to start it? We need to start it today. We need to start it at, let's say, 1:50 p.m. It'll take about 10 minutes to brew that cup of coffee. Estimated hours, again, all optional fields, but if you want to include this information, you can. I expect it's going to take about 15 minutes, so I'm going to put in a quarter of an hour there. And then also if we want to upload any files, if I need some sort of instructional guidelines on how to brew some coffee. So I submit that, and it adds it to my dashboard. So the whole point of this is that it's really, really easy to quickly add things to people's dashboards. If you have your alerts set up, it'll send them an email, let them know, hey, you really need to brew some coffee. It's really important. It's an urgent item, and it'll show up on their dashboard as well. So really quick and easy way to delegate tasks and have them show up for people without having to go through a lot of different screens in the system. The next thing we're going to look at is another shortcut method that a lot of people also aren't aware of that I find can be very beneficial and easy to use. So if I'm seeing that question mark kind of pop up and pop down, anything that you think we should address on screen?
Hi, yeah, lots of questions coming in. Lots of good questions. Haven't actually had a chance to read all of them yet. One thing that I probably can touch on though is around having a timeline task and a shared task. Currently, you are unable to switch it from just a standard task into a shared task, but we are hoping that that will be functionality that we see in the future. Yeah, Mark, anything you want to add to that? That's been a pretty active question.
Yeah, for sure. I'll touch on that in schedules. It's a really common one, and you are correct. And I'll provide a visual overview of what Sophie's talking about, so that everyone's very clear on what that means. We'll take a look at that when we get into scheduling. Awesome. Thanks, Soph, and thank you everyone for your questions. Please do continue to bang them in, and don't worry, she's very experienced in this. She'll handle it really well. Don't hesitate to continue to throw those questions at her, and I'll check in periodically to see if I can help out as well. Okay, so the next thing that I want to show is the concept of adding a task from a job's financials page and what that means. So I'm going to navigate to a job here. It's a job I created for this webinar. It's called Simple Job. So I'm just going to navigate to the job's details page. And I just created this. It's a very simple job. There isn't any tasks or anything in it yet. And this job, in this example, doesn't need a schedule. But it does have a structure. And that structure we can see in the Financials tab. The Financials tab of a job is an overview of the job scope of work structure. What are the different services that need to be done? What are the different expenses that need to be purchased? And then for each of these, is there a dollar value? And I always am a huge advocate, unless you're an internal agency and you don't really deal with any kind of financials at all. I'm a really big proponent of putting in values and estimated hours. Now, one thing that you can do from here is I can actually add a task for one of these items very quickly. So this design task, for example, let's say I want to assign this design work to an individual. Then I can choose to click on this plus icon, and it's going to bring me immediately to the task add page and fill in some of the information automatically. It fills in the title of the task. It will fill in a description if I had entered one. It was blank in this case, so it didn't. It will fill in the job. It will fill in the service, and it will also fill in the estimated hours. Now, in this case, I'm going to say, design task, A. I'm going to assign it to myself. And the estimated hours, I'm going to choose 5 hours. So this is a task that's going to be for 5 hours, and it's going to be due on Friday. I'm going to submit that, and that task is now assigned. It'll show up on my dashboard. But I want to go back and do it again. And if I click on the job number, that will bring me back to the Job Financials tab. Now, from here, looking at the job, I can see that I have some tasks. And of course, I can select it and see what those tasks are. But looking at the Financials tab, later on, same day or a week later, whatever it might be, if I want to delegate another task to design, if I click on the plus icon, it's going to do the same thing, but you'll notice now that this box is showing me some important information. It's showing me, for the service of design, that I have 20 hours estimated. It's also showing me that I have 5 hours delegated. So I've already delegated 5 of those 20 hours. There is no actual time tracked against this yet. And then if there's any time that's been estimated specifically for the person selected, that will show as well, although that's a lot less common. But this is a really helpful tool to understand how many hours we have budgeted for this service and this job, and then how many have we actually allocated if you're just doing a kind of a task one at a time workflow scenario. So really, really helpful information. Sometimes I'll even pull up a task details page in another window or another tab while I'm creating a schedule or something like that, so that I can refer over to that task and see how many hours are delegated as I add new items, and that updates. So that's a method from, for assigning tasks from the Jobs Financials tab. When I see people doing this, I find they're really quick at it. So it's a good way for you to start using tasks if you're not using them right now. Like if you're not using function points, the function point system for tasking at this time, but you are using it for managing your jobs and perhaps budgeting and things like that. This is a really, really easy way to low barrier to entry for you to jump in, see the structure of a job, and just really quickly delegate these items without having to go through the process of scheduling. So I recommend checking that out. Now, there's a few other ways of delegating tasks individually, and I just want to cover them really quickly. It's all really the same thing. What I've shown you so far is shortcuts. So I showed you the quick task, and we looked at the financials tab. But of course, you can also, from the job details page, just choose to add a new task from the add new selection up at the top right. Doing so is going to give you the same page. It just doesn't autofill the service. It doesn't autofill the title. It doesn't autofill the description or the estimated hours. So that's usually why I recommend doing so from the financials tab if you have, if you're just delegating one task. There's also the add task button within the main navigation bar, because the system has to be consistent. Every module has an add option, but I find this used less than others, because typically, if you're going to assign a task related to a job, I'd recommend selecting that job, or navigating to it if you haven't looked at it in a while, using the financials tab. Or if you just need to assign something really quickly and it isn't really related to a job, then I usually recommend using the quick task functionality for that. It's much easier, less labor intensive, and you can do it from your dashboard. You can also do the quick task from the tasks and to-dos page. So if I'm looking at my tasks and to-dos page, and this is more related to kind of task reporting and task management that we'll look at in 2 weeks from now, but if I'm looking at my tasks and to-dos page and I'm saying, I'm looking at everything for my client Great Atlantic, so I have all my open tasks for my client Great Atlantic Insurance, and I just want to add a new task. So I'm just going to click Add New Task up at the top right there, and it brings me the quick task that we saw from the dashboard. So some good functionality around there, related to the quick task concept, and I'd recommend checking that out if you haven't done so already. So we've taken a look at the content that exists within the task. We've looked at assigning tasks through quick tasks, and also from the job financials page. And we spent some time looking at that task details page. So I feel like we've covered the gambit on the task itself, the item itself. Now we're going to go into the actual process of scheduling and looking at the different options for creating schedules and how that interaction occurs. Sophie, how are you managing those questions? Are you anything that you want me to address on screen, or anything that's you think maybe needs clearing up, or more context?
Hey, Mark. You know what? Really good questions are coming in. The thing is, they're very specific to the workflow of some of these agencies. Maybe just in cases like this, I might actually be reaching out to some of you outside of the webinar and organizing some one-on-one sessions just so we can really dig into what it is you specifically need. Unfortunately, my fingers aren't fast enough to actually type out a full response to some of these. So there will probably be some follow-ups to a lot of people today. But if anyone does, oh, sorry, Mark.
No problem. Thanks, Sophie. Yeah, it's so funny because sometimes I talk about in other webinars about how sometimes we'll have just a massive influx of questions, and other times we'll have a bit more quiet groups, and we really appreciate it. So thank you everyone for sharing your questions today, and thank you, Sophie, for managing those. We'll make sure to to reach out and assist. We'll probably if there's too much, we'll get some other team members involved and get them to assist as well. Okay, so let's jump into the actual scheduling. I think that this is probably the more interesting concept that people are wanting to see today, but I do like to cover all that quick task stuff, because it can be really useful, and can give you a really good user experience once you get used to it. So I do like to cover that at the start. But let's get into the scheduling. So there's a few different workflow examples that I'm going to show today, and one of them that we're going to spend a bit more time on than others is creating a schedule from an existing job, using that job, using the structure of that job as the template for the schedule. And then we're going to look at some other examples as well, some other methods and concepts around scheduling, different start points you might implement in your workflow. So I've navigated to a job that I created for this webinar. It's called Schedule Job. It's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. It's a $12,000 job. It's meant to represent like a just a design piece like a brochure or something like that, something really simple. And we can take a look at its financials, and we can see that we have a really common structure that I select as an example quite a bit. So, creative services, some research, design, copy and production, some client management, and then expenses. We'll be purchasing some photography and also purchasing some printing. So from here, I am going to choose to add a schedule for this job. And I'm going to do that by selecting Add New up at the top right and selecting Add Schedule. Now, the first option you're going to have here is what template do you want to load up? The default is going to be using this service structure that we're looking at. So what you see here behind this window on the left, use the service structure as the template for the schedule. And that's what we're going to do for this example. There's also an option to include external expenses. So if I need to delegate tasks or schedule in this case, photography and printing, then I would choose to include my external expenses. Then I'll click Submit, and it brings me into the Schedule Details page. Now from here, you're going to notice a lot of information is filled in. We have the tasks have come from our service structure. We then have descriptions. If any descriptions were entered already, then those will fill in as well. We have the service that are tied to these tasks. We also have the hours that have come in from the estimate. So we estimated 30 hours for design. We're seeing 30 hours for design here. From here, we can then go ahead and build out our schedule. And I'm gonna show my preferred method for how I recommend doing that. So the first thing that I'd recommend doing is dealing with the expenses, not so much when they're going to be done and who's going to be doing them, but linking them to a service. So the task of photography and the task of printing are related to external expenses, and you can't track time to external expenses. So the service dropdown is blank. So we want to relate that to something right away. And in this case, I might lump it into the client management bucket. It might have been more applicable if I had included some sort of additional production service, or if I had maybe a vendor management service or something like that. In this case, we're going to lump it in with client management in case we need to track time to these items. So now that we've done that, we can then look more at the actual delegation of the work and assigning individuals to these tasks. And this is usually how I see people, the order in which I see people going through the schedule that works the best. We have our task structure, and then we're really just delegating the work. So I'm assigning our research work here to Darren. I'm going to have then the design work done by Darren as well. But I also want another design task, and let's say I want 3 tasks here. I want 2 design tasks done by specific people, and I want a 3rd task done by multiple people. Right now I have 1 task. So what's the best way to go about that? How can I add in the additional items and create the structure that I need in order to get the work done? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a task right below design, just by clicking this plus icon. And I'll give it a title, second design portion. And I'll save that. Now, this task here needs to be related to a service. So this is, of course, related to design. It also doesn't have any budgeted hours, but I'm going to leave that for now, and I'll explain in just a minute. So I have my first design task. I have the second portion of my design. I now need another task that I'm going to assign to multiple individuals. And as Sophie was mentioning, I can't turn this task here, once, a timeline task, I can't turn it into a shared task, but I can easily add a shared task right next to it, perhaps replace it, or just add it in addition, which is what I'm going to do here. I'm going to select this dropdown, and I'm going to add a shared task directly below the second design portion. We're going to call this, design collaboration. And notice the multi-person icon, indicating that this is in fact a shared task. This task is also related to the service of design, And we can now go through the delegation. So I know that I want my second task done by Jess, and I want the third task done by both Darren and Jess, and we're going to bring in Caitlin for this one too. So I have 3 individuals working on this task now, Darren, Jess, and Caitlin. We can see all 3 of those. From here, I then want to split out these hours. Now I'm going to show you a bit of a trick, and I mentioned it earlier, I alluded to it earlier. I'm going to show a trick that I like to do in order to really help me, keep on top of this. Make sure that I'm delegating the amount of hours that I have that are specific to the budget, and knowing exactly how much time I have left and how much I've updated and things like that. The way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to click on this design task. I'm going to right click on it. This is a trick that I like to use. I'm going to right click on this task. I'm going to open it in a new tab. Actually, usually I'd open it in a new window. I happen to have 2 monitors. In this case, I would just open it in a new tab. I might even, pull that tab out and resize it if I don't need it to be too big, just so that I have the info there. And I'm actually going to drag that off to the side. If you have 1 monitor, probably be in a new tab, but I'm going to put it in my other monitor and bring it back. Well, I'm going to show you why in a second. So let's say that I then want to delegate the hours. So I have my first design task, my second design portion, and my design collaboration task. I have 30 hours in the budget that came from the estimate. This first task is going to take 10 hours. Jess's task is a bit smaller. It's only going to take her 4 hours. This design collaboration task is going to take, let's say, 3 hours per person. So I'm going to put in 3 hours. When I put in 3 hours, because this is a shared task, this is the amount of time that each person is going to be spending on this task. When I click out and I save it, notice how it adjusts to 9, because I have 3 individuals and we're putting in 3 hours per person, totaling 9 hours. I now have 10 hours, 4 hours, and 9 hours. But how many hours did I budget for design? Because I just made a whole bunch of edits to those hours, and it's not quite clear to me on this page. But I do have that design page here, that task details page, which I can now refresh, take a look at, and see that for the service of design, I have 30 hours estimated and 23 hours allocated. So I know that I have 7 hours left in the budget to work with, and I'm going to choose to not delegate that time. And I'm not going to bump up the task estimated hours with those remaining 7 hours, because that's buffer room for me. I know that I have 7 hours in case there's any revision requests that maybe we're out of scope that we're going to include in the initial pricing. Or if there's some sort of internal issue that causes us to go over, I have a bit of a buffer room there, and that's so I'm gonna play with that. So I've now accomplished what I needed in order to get my design work delegated to the right people. I have my first task, my second task, and my collaboration. Those are some of the methods that I recommend around adding additional tasks and also adding shared tasks to assign to multiple people. Once you start to get the hang of this, it's pretty quick and easy. I'm often just clicking this plus icon or adding shared tasks right in line and just kind of going through that schedule, building out the items that I need. Sophie, anything I missed, or anything you want me to address on screen that have come in from attendees?
No, there was one good question from Casey. They're actually still utilizing the old edit view. So the shared task functionality will not be added onto that view. We are hoping to put sort of the last bits of functionality that are still living in that old edit view into the new grid view and phasing that out. So no, unfortunately, we won't be able to add shared tasks into there.
So let's take a look at what Sophie's talking about here, and just so those people that aren't using that can get an idea of what it is we're referring to. So up at the top, there is a button here that says Old Edit View, and this is basically just the old version of the schedule that we've kept in for 2 specific reasons. One is that the bulk edit functionality hasn't been added to the current grid view. So for example, updating the priority of all the tasks to normal, if I don't want to have to go through that one by one. The schedule module is a very large module, and there's a lot of moving parts. Instead of building it all completely on the side and then releasing it one big go, we build it in chunks and then test, do prototype testing, do client side testing, and then release things as they're completed. And this bulk edit functionality will be added to the new grid view, as well as some functionality around adjusting dates, which we're actually going to take a look at using our Gantt chart a little bit later. But that is what Sophie was referring to there. So I'm just going to choose to cancel that edit. Actually, I suppose I could have submitted it. Either way is fine. And go back to my current edit view. So from here, I'm really just going to quickly delegate these other tasks here so that we can move on. I'm going to assign the copywriting here. Now I'm scrolling through and I'm not quite finding what I'm looking for. So just to make my life easier, I'm just going to start to type in the person's name. There's Jeremy there. Select him, and he fills in for me. The production work, we're going to delegate to, let's say, myself. And then client management, we're not going to delegate to anyone at this time. In fact, we may even, you might even want to delete that task and not have it assigned to anyone specifically, and people can just track time to the service if they happen to be needing to do any client management work. In fact, I might even just get rid of this task altogether. Once you have your delegation down, it's now time to look at, when is this work going to be done? And again, I'm really going to stick to what I recommend as the easiest way to go about this, and that is using the Gantt chart, which has had a bunch of improvements recently, and it's just a pleasure to use. I love the thing these days, so we're going to take a look at that. The first thing I'm going to do actually is I'm actually going to use this old edit view to bulk change my status. I'm going to put everything into assigned. Now let's jump into the Gantt view. We've created the task structure that we need. We've delegated to the appropriate people, including a shared task. I'm now going to switch to the Gantt view, and I'm going to use the Gantt view to create all of my dates. And it's really easy. It's really simple. All I need to do is just select to add dates now for each of these tasks. I now have a bar representing each of these tasks. I can see what the task is, who it's assigned to, and in this case, multiple individuals for the design collaboration. And I can now go ahead and build up my schedule. And I'm doing that just by dragging the lines within the Gantt chart. I need the research done, by the 7th, the end of the day on the 6th. The design portion is going to start immediately after that. It's going to go for a little while, and I'm going to create a dependency between these tasks by selecting this dot and dragging it up to the research task, and that's creating a dependency between these two tasks. The second design portion is going to be dependent upon the completion of the first. Maybe I'll take that first one to take a little bit less time, and then again I will create a dependency structure there as well. Lastly, we have the design collaboration. Perhaps this is related to any kind of client revisions that are requested, and we're going to obviously connect those two tasks as well. We'll have that maybe starting on the Wednesday. We can then, of course, go ahead and do the same with the rest of this work. Now, you can also create a double dependency. So in order for, let's say, the design collaboration to start, we need the second design portion to be finished. Our copywriting is going to be going roughly around the same time, and that is also dependent upon the completion of the design collaboration. So notice the double dependency. When this task finishes, these two tasks, which are dependent upon its completion, are now starting. And then we have the rest of our tasks, and we can, of course, go ahead and build that out as we see fit. Everything's already delegated to the appropriate people. If there's a specific date for the photography, maybe the photographer's coming on site on the 14th, and then the printing, of course, is going to happen at the end. It's going to happen on the 10th of July. So once we have then our everything built out, there really is no next step. I mean, everything is now built here. There isn't any additional steps to go through. All these tasks are on individuals' dashboards. If I didn't want them to show up on the dashboards until I was ready, of course I could have kept them in a draft mode. Notice that the photography and printing are still in draft because I haven't actually delegated these to any individuals yet. I can either do that later or not do it at all, and have these not necessarily need to be assigned to anyone, but just as markers within the Gantt chart to represent when these things need to be completed by. So that is my recommendation for a best practice for using the schedules module. Delegating your resources for the tasks that you're able to do so, and then going ahead and building out that schedule. Of course, I understand that that may not be the case, that that may not be applicable to every situation. You may need to put in dates before you know who can do the work. And that, of course, relates to resource allocation and things like that, which we'll be reviewing in 2 weeks' time. And you might want to, maybe you're building like a test schedule, and you're going to decide later on who's going to do the work if the work even gets closed. Perhaps you're doing this as a preliminary practice of building the schedule before the work has been approved. So there may be other use case scenarios, but in that kind of most common scenario where you have a job come in, you know who needs to do the work, and then you need to build out a schedule for when it needs to be done. Delegating the individuals, and then using the Gantt chart to create your structure and your dates is what I find to be the easiest. And I especially like this particular page. It's really nice to work with, very responsive. We have some other upgrades coming to this stuff as well in the not too distant future that'll make it some different colors for different things, different task types and things like that. But yeah, it's great. I can't say enough about how much of an improvement the Gantt chart is, and how much of a pleasure it is to work with. We're going to now be jumping into some other workflow options and some other concepts of scheduling and delegating tasks within schedules in a different order, kind of a less traditional order that may work better for your agency or may work better for certain types of work that you have coming in. So if you feel like I should check in again, though, how are you doing? Anything that you want me to touch on or share on screen?
You know what? Not really. A lot of things are around like notifications right now when tasks are being assigned to individuals. I guess just a heads up for everyone, we can set up alerts if you want people to be alerted. We can shut them off if you don't want them to be alerted, as well as when you're actually building, another item that someone else brought up was when you're building out the schedule with all these individual dependencies on them. What we would recommend is actually leaving all the tasks in a status of draft until you're ready to actually assign them out, so that people aren't seeing crazy changes happening all the time. Mark, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Everything saves here automatically. So as I'm adjusting things, it's saving. So that somebody might see a new task. If you have things in an assigned status, someone might see a task on their dashboard and say, hey, this thing's due next Tuesday, and then they go, they leave the page, and then they come back a couple minutes later, and all of a sudden, whoa, no, it's due tomorrow now, because you're adjusting the schedule and making changes. So Sophie's referring to the concept of leaving these tasks in a status of draft until you're ready, until you want to then push everything out, including alerts as well, because this status is a gate for alerts. So anything in draft isn't gonna email anyone until you're ready. So some good comments there. Let's take a look now at some other options for building schedules. And what I want to look at now is really templates and how we can use templates to make our lives easier. So actually I was thinking when I was kind of practicing this webinar and going through, for these webinars, I'll often I won't really do like a dry run, but I'll run through all the different kind of scenarios that I want to go over, and I thought, okay, well, we'll turn the schedule that we create into a template. Then I decided against that because I want to show a more realistic example where the dates are actually from way in the past. Because if I turn this into a template now, all the dates are starting today. So I want to have something that is more of an example of where I created a template a couple months ago, and I want to use it now. And I'm going to show you best practice for that and how I recommend doing it. Regarding creating templates, it's really, really easy. Once you have a schedule that you'd like to use again, up at the top right, there's a button here that says Actions, and you can choose to convert this template to a schedule. Now, if it is part of an existing piece of work, then you can convert a copy, and you'll have that template or that schedule as a template to be used over and over again. But in this case, I already have a template that I created, so we're going to use that one. and I actually want to use it for a new job. So I'm actually going to go to this schedule job here, and I'm just going to copy the structure of this job, and I'm going to call this template example. Now this is we're going to take a look at two different workflow options when it comes to schedule templates, and it's really looking at the order in which things are done. In this example, we're going to be looking at the idea of having a job that already exists and then creating a schedule for an existing job using a template. And there's some key points that are really important to remember when you're doing that. I don't see it used as often as I'd like. And I think I think maybe it's because of some misconceptions of how that works. Let's take a look at how this works from, in this order where we have a job and then we're creating a schedule from a template for an existing job. After that, we're going to reverse those. We're going to reverse the order of those items, where we're going to start with a scheduled template and then have that actually build the job for us. And we'll talk about some use cases for both of these. So for the first example, if I might even have an estimate template for this. In this case, I copied an estimate, and we have now a structure for a job, but I did that mostly for the sake of time. But we have now a job that's open, and I'm going to choose to add a schedule to it. Now, the scenario here is that this is a common job. It's something that we do quite a bit, and because it's a common job, because I know really what's involved in accomplishing it, I've created a schedule template in advance that I'm going to use every single time we do this type of job. And maybe I customize it a little bit to accommodate the specific scenario that we're working with right now. But for the most part, it's really the same. So I created a template for this job, and I open the job first. Then I select Add Schedule. I'm then going to choose in my template the template that I want. So I have a template here called Brochure Schedule. That's the one I'm looking for. So I'm going to select that. And there's a checkbox here that says autofill form from template details. Like if I select this, it can autofill titles and descriptions. Usually you would just leave that blank. But when I submit this, it is going to show me my schedule that already exists. I've already created it, and I already have the tasks and everything. I haven't delegated the tasks to specific people. I could in my template if I wanted to, but in this example, I'm pretending that I don't know who's going to need to do the work yet, but I do know what the work is going to be. So it fills in automatically with the details of the schedule. And there's a couple really important points to mention here. One is, if we look at the grid view, you're going to notice that my service happens to be filled in. And the only way that can be the case, the only way that the service can auto-populate in a schedule when you are creating a schedule from a template for an existing job, and I know that's a bit of a mouthful. Think about it this way. I have a job open. I'm creating a schedule for it from a template. If the services happen to match what you had in that job already, if they didn't, it's not a big deal. This field will just be blank, and you'll just need to select something. But you can have it autofill if you want to, which I'd usually recommend doing if you consistently know what the structure will be and what work will be done. You can save yourself some time by including that detail in your template. Now, in this example, I created this template back in April. It's not really the case. I created it more recently than that, but as I mentioned earlier, I created it to pretend like I created it back in April. And I now need to update this to today's date. And here's how I'd recommend doing it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch from the weekly view to the monthly view. You're going to see a little calendar icon up at the top left. When I select monthly view, you're going to see all these bars shrink. So notice how it all got a lot smaller, and I now have a lot more screen real estate to work with. So I'm going to switch to a monthly view. The next thing we're going to do is I'm going to select all tasks by clicking on this checkbox up at the top left. That selects all my tasks, including any dependent and non-dependent tasks, because I want to move the whole schedule. I'm then going to select the top bar, and I'm going to drag it, whole thing, all the way to today's date. and drop it. And the entire schedule has moved to starting on today's date. Now, if any of these tasks, and it just coincidentally happened not to, I didn't plan it this way, it just happened to not, but if any of these tasks would have landed on a weekend, so the due date landing on a Saturday or a Sunday, the system would have automatically bumped that due date to the Monday. And in fact, when I drag this whole thing, you can start to notice how the bar is shrinking and expanding as I do to accommodate for those weekends. So that's some nice functionality there. And yeah, so now everything is updated to today's date. Maybe I don't want it to start today. Maybe I want it to start, in next Friday, for example. Then I can have that, starting whenever I want to. So yeah, so I mean, really easy to kind of drag that whole thing around, and that's a really effective method of updating those dates using the Gantt chart. So that's the method I'd recommend using when you have a job open and you want to add a schedule using an existing template. This is something that I would have a goal for myself to have as many of these scenarios as possible. Whenever I can have things pre-planned and I can have the schedule templates already created and then use those and have them match up to the job structure, that would be, it's difficult because it takes, you have to have a lot of instances of these jobs to really feel confident in the schedule being really accurate. But the more you do it, the more accurate you'll get. So, for myself, I would have a goal of having as many of these templates and using them as much as possible. Now we're running up on the last 5 minutes here. I'm not going to take any questions at this time. Instead, we're going to look at the other workflow example. Should be able to finish it up in about 5 or 6 minutes, and then we'll stay on for a little bit longer. We'll take on any last questions at the end of that as well. But really, the next thing that I wanted to show is around starting with a schedule template. So in this case, I don't have a job opened yet, and I'm going to start by using the schedule template and having that building a job for me. So I'm going to add a schedule, let's say to my client McDonald & Co., and I'm going to choose my template of, let's just say brochure schedule. I'm going to call it, Mac brochure, and then update the description and things like that if I want to. Click submit, and as you would expect, it autofills with my template and all of its detail. Now, I might come in here and make any adjustments. So if I want to, adjust the hours, then I can. If I want to delegate people at this time, then I can do that as well. Whatever information I want to, I can update here as I see fit. But most importantly, once I'm ready, up at the top right, there's a button that says Add Estimate and Job. Selecting this is going to automatically create an estimate and a job using this schedule as the structure for, under which the job and the estimate will be created. So when I select this, it's going to bring the Add Estimate page up for me in the same, without leaving the page. It brings up the window. The name fills in, the type I'll select. Choose my contact, my client if I want to. Update the due date if I know what it's going to be. Any other information that I want to. And then notice that this bottom area here is showing me, based on your schedule, these are the services that are going to fill in. These are the hours that are going to fill in, and these are the rates that are going to be applied to those hours. So it's giving me a bit of a preview as to what the end result of this is going to be. Usually, you don't really have to pay too much attention to this or adjust it. All you need to do is click Submit. We now have an estimate and a job with an estimated value that is completely based on the amount of time that we put into the schedule. I did this from a template, but you may not necessarily need to do this from a template. In fact, this might be a really good way for you to use this tool and this method to price work that you've never done before or aren't as consistent in your budgeting for. Instead of building the budget in the estimate module, build a schedule that represents what you actually expect the work to be, what needs to be done in order to deliver the job, and then use that information to have the system tell you, based on your schedule It's going to cost you $2,850 to complete this work, and the billable value is $9,500. We can, of course, add in some expenses in here, but it's, it's telling us based on our schedule, this is what you should be charging for this piece of work. Maybe the client has a budget of $9,000, so we go ahead and we adjust this and knock $500 off, but at least we know. Knowing is half the battle. A little G.I. Joe reference in there for the last minute of this webinar. Sophie is literally shaking her head. I mean, she's literally shaking her head. So we're just down our last 2 minutes here. I know I kind of went over that last part pretty quickly. Sophie, anything that you think I should touch on, or any other questions that you want to have covered?
No, the questions have started slowing down. Thanks for taking us through that, Mark. It's always a pleasure having you walk through schedules. And if anyone has any follow-up questions outside of the webinar, please feel free to reach out to success@functionpoint.com. We're happy to help you with all of your additional training needs.
Yeah, thanks everyone for that attended today. I really appreciate your time and your questions. Thank you, Sophie, for co-hosting with me and answering those questions. This webinar is being recorded and will be sent out afterwards. And the second half of this will be done in 2 weeks' time, where we're going to look at how to manage, report on, and understand tasks that are delegated and assigned in your system, and so that you can have a handle on what's going on and understand where your agency is at with all the different work that's currently out there. So I guess that does it for us for today. Thank you again for joining us in this webinar, and I guess we will see you all next week. Actually, I will not be here myself, but I will see you in 2 weeks' time for our scheduling and task management webinar. Sorry, my apologies, for our task management and task reporting webinar. Thank you again, everyone, for your time, and have yourselves a great rest of your Wednesday. Cheers. Bye now.